I wanted to begin with talking a little bit about your very early days, not merely as a painter, but also as a professional who had come to Bombay after studying in Lahore and becoming a banker.
Yeah,
Very few people know that.
yeah.
So tell us about those early days. That must have been what, in the late 40s?
I was in Multan first, where my father was. That's where I came and I joined Emerson College there. And Emerson College, I had to do I came from England. I was at school in England. So when I came, I had to do my FA. And this was during the war, Mark. So I needed a classical language, which I had none. And what classical language? I mean, I've been, 4.5 years in England in school. I'd forgotten, and I went at the age of 13, So I'd forgotten everything. I'd all Punjabi, it all came back very fast. And Urdu smattering, which from the childhood, we had a master who used to come to the house, and all four of us would sit writing the takhti, learning from him, and so on. So my father's an educationist in the real sense of the word, So we were brought up with this kind of stuff. So, but anyway, in Multan when I came, I had to do my inter. And so I said, oh, well, I'll do Persian. So we had two Maulvis. Well, they were teachers, they're Maulvis also. And I've never had better teachers anywhere. They were fantastic in the sense that they made me love the language. It wasn't a down, drilling things into me. There was no drilling at all. It was reading. I read the Tuzke Babri, for instance. I had to write. There's a long chapter on the Tuzke Babri there. And I was delighted with it, the way they taught me. I still remember that.
And Farsi has remained with you.
Farsi is my classical language. I got a high second in it. I did it in 4 months. I had to then appear for the exam, which everybody else did. And I got a high second for 4 months, beginning from scratch. So, and I still remember it. It's a great language.
Yes, yes.
It's a great language. And anyway, so I came, then I joined government college, and I was, fully participated in all the college activities. I was in the dramatic society. I was a key figure in the dramatic society, in the debating I did, the sports I did.
But no painting at that stage.
I was painting, yes. They had an annual kind of an exhibition, picture shown there, and I got a credit for that. I had a little pamphlet or a little certificate saying, pictures such and such. If winter comes, I still remember the name of the picture. Very happy days, but I did I did an honors degree in English literature, which is again one of my favorites, poetry particularly, of which I remember yards of it, and even now it just sort of drops in. I don't have to think about it; it just comes, reams of it, and beginning with Chaucer. I mean, again, very few people understand the Old English now, yes. But it's fantastic, it's beautiful. Anyway, I did that, and then after that, a friend of our family had a huge printing press, and so I joined the printing press. I was inveigled into it. I was going off on leave, on chutti actually, to Kashmir with my friend Teji Chawla. And Teji went, and I was told, no, stay back, why don't you try this, and so on, and if you don't like it, give it up, and offer. So I tried. I quite liked it, and I learned something on the job, printing. And finally, I became the works manager of this press. Then came the partition, and like everybody else, my father was warned about this in a very surreptitious, quiet way in his office, that you must leave, and leave tomorrow. Because assassins were around, you see. That's how it happened. And so we left and went to had to go to Simla ultimately, because that's where the Indian part of the education department moved there.
Okay.
Some documents, some things, and others were left behind, and they were fetched later on. M.G. Singh, for instance, who was the registrar of the university at that time, he was in Simla, and he came down to fetch some documents, and he was assassinated there. You know, it was a very grim, horrible situation. I lost my job, of course. I mean, I took 6 days leave to just send my parents there, and didn't go down for 40 years. I mean, but, you know, as Eliot says, our beginnings never know our ends. And what is a desperate situation can also have a beneficial result, which you can't foresee. And it happens. I met a chap, quite by accident, Maurice Bottrell. We passed each other, and he looked at me. I never wear a tie. Certainly in Simla, I never wore a tie. I was an open neck and so on. On this occasion, I was going somewhere, and I had on my tie, and it was the old school tie. So he looked at me. He said, "Were you at Imperial Service College?" I said, "Yes, I was." So he said, "So was I." So we shook hands, old boys, you know, together and so on. And he'd come to take over from Panchi Sen, who was then the manager of Grindlays at that time. So that's how I got it. So then they won both Panchi, and he asked me, "Listen, would you like to join Grindlays?" At that stage, I would have done anything, you know. I needed a job. I needed economic independence. I was 21 exactly.
That's how you entered banking.
That's how. Yeah, they said, "Will you go around?" I just written about this in the book on Grindlays, actually. They went down, and they said the chairman, the Right Honourable Donald Campbell, is coming, and he's on an annual tour. So, would you like to go around, you know, and be interviewed? I said, fine. So an interview was arranged. I went down. I was there. I knocked on the door, and then I went. I was shown in. A fellow called Gordon Reed was then the manager of Grindlays in Connaught Place. Very nice chap. So in I go, and I come in there, and there was this large man. He says, "Well, come in, young man, come in, and you know, sit down, you know, opposite." So I sat down. I didn't automatically sit down. My father taught me that when you go for an interview, you don't assume that the chair is meant for you. You got to be asked. So I did. And so he asked me a few questions. He said, first of all, he said, "What makes you think that you'll be a good banker?" So I said, "Nothing at all, sir. I have no thought on it." "Why do you want to join banking then?" So I said, "Perhaps you've heard, sir, that there's been a partition in this country. You want a job?" I said, "Yes, I want a job." "Okay, you've got it."
That's it.
That's it. 5 minutes. Honest talk. No hiding, no big brushes, no nothing, you know. It was straight. I think he liked that idea. And then I was straight about this, and I couldn't have been anything else anyway. So,
and that took you to Bombay.
And that's what took me to Bombay. Now in Bombay, I was there barely, I think, a week or 10 days, and I was, you know, as a new boy, I was being initiated into various activities in the bank. I've been being taught, department by department, as to what happens and so on and so on. Then tests were taken regularly, every week, written tests.
To see whether you were up to it.
To see, the questions would be asked in writing, and I would have to write back to say what I thought of it, you see. And then it would be corrected, then I'd be told that this is so. You know, it was a regular affair. So I'll tell you, for lunch hour, you could, so I don't know Bombay at all, you know. I just wandered out, you know, onto where the old Bombay Art Society was and so on, just around that corner, in the Kala Ghoda atmosphere. Not far from Mint Road, you know. I just walked down the road and there. And I saw a Bombay Art Society written outside. So I said, let me take a look. I was interested. So I wandered up, took the steps going up, and the two women coming down, you know, grumbling and all, disgusting. And Souza was having a show. And there, as I entered, right in front of me was this Souza's self-portrait, nude, standing, coming right forward. There was a court case. I mean, the police got hold of it eventually. And that's another story.
For obscenity.
For obscenity, but he compromised. He compromised. But, you know, they said blot out the genitals and so on. He put little bits of newspaper or whatever across these things. So he edited his own work, you know. I won't tell you what the others said about this thing, but Akbar didn't. Akbar Padamsi.
Yeah, well, he fought the case.
He fought the case. He fought the case, and he was very young, very tough, and that's another long story about which I'll tell you later. But anyway, when I told Akbar that this had happened, he says, you know, the man's castrated himself. You don't, if you believe something, you don't, first of all, if you don't believe it, you don't put it down. But if you put it down, you've got to stand by it, you know. However, I mean, I am sort of being waylaid by these ideas and so on. The fact is, that was my entry point. I met Souza. We got to know each other, then gradually met everybody else, and then I got to know Palsikar in a very strange way. Renu, my wife, wasn't my wife then, but she was traveling to England to do her BA in psychology and philosophy in London University. And she was sharing a cabin with somebody who'd actually been in the JJ school, and she knew Palsikar well. So they both talked to each other, and yeah, no, I'll ask Palsikar to go and see Krishen. And he did. He came and saw me. A wonderful man, really a great man. And I had just, this is 6 months later this happened. After I'd been there, I started painting again.
But tell me, the progressive group
Was
had
there.
already there.
It was there. It was there. It was there. Ara was there. Husain was there, and Souza. These were the three initials. Husain came in later. So did Gade was one of the originals too. So anyway, I met these fellows and so on. But Palsikar, actually what really drew them to me was that I'd done a painting of a memory image which I had when I was in Delhi when Gandhiji was assassinated. That evening there was panic all around. Panic in the sense, gloom. And as I came through Connaught Place, in the evening, these little islands which are, you know, there were islands in the middle of the road, you know, and a lamp there. And underneath this lamp, lots of people clustered together. There's just intensity of gloom. Everybody, quiet faces, reading newspapers, you know. So this was like, and I painted this picture. The first picture I painted in Bombay was news of Gandhiji's death. Palsikar saw it, and he said, and the Bombay Art Society was celebrating its golden jubilee or some such thing. So he said, put it in there. I said, listen, I don't know anybody there. I'm a rank outsider. I'm just painting and let's see what happens. He said, no, I'll tell you what, I'll take this picture. He took the picture. He put it in. I've forgotten all about it. When I went to see it, it was bang in the middle, you know, of the dais. There was all my buddies around, all my subsequent buddies, like Husain was there. Tayyib wasn't there. Gaitonde was there. Heba was there. Souza was there.
It's a magical moment for you.
You see, you know, look, I tell you honestly, one never knows how things are going to work out. If it hadn't been for the partition, I wouldn't have been here. So this was and then they asked for me. I mean, I got a letter from, Husain rang me up. He says, हमें मिलना चाहिए. तो मैं कहा आइए. So he came to my little room in Chateau Windsor, right on top somewhere. So he came, he sat down and he looked and so on. And it's an old story now. He inducted me into the group. And the rule was there that each member of the group was allowed, there was nothing written. They were allowed to induct one other person. And I was inducted in. And at that time, the others also inducted people in. Gaitonde was inducted into the group. Samant was also good. For people who have forgotten Samant, he was a wonderful painter. He was inducted into the group. You know, that's how the group functioned. There was no squabbling. There was a lot of fighting, professional fighting. Not he's got further than I. No, none of that. But on basis of ye kya kiya, you know.
And you critiqued each other's work.
Yes, we every week, any funny thing is, any new work that ever happened was seen. It wasn't kept, for sale. Galleries to thi nahi usko. Ek hi thi chal. And so this meetings at various places. My place became a place for meeting people. We were meeting in the Bombay Art Society, which later on became the Bombay Art Society moved to the much larger building, and this became an artist's
center.
Yeah.
Tell me this discussion, was it on issues of artistic ideology or technique or?
Yeah. And see, what actually signified this group, how it was different to everything else. It always, there was no, previously, the painting was like nice Sunday, comfortable things like nice weather, still life, yevo. They never thought that painting in itself is an independent activity too, in its own right, you know. It's not an auxiliary to a nice sort of luncheon party with a nice pictures hand or teapot. You know, it was basically that. It had become that, you know. But they were people who were breaking out of it already. It's not that the group was the first to break out. The group broke out en bloc. And that was the insistence on form. That the formal aspect of it was being ignored previously. There was no such thing as form as a separate entity. See, form, they never even thought of form. They said human beings there, it became anecdotal, all sorts of things were happening. But the relevance of the elements of painting themselves were never regarded as intrinsic. And that is what the group stood for.
And it must have been a very exciting time because...
Extremely exciting. Extremely exciting.
Because if you remember, around that time, there was so much else happening in culture.
Hell of a lot.
In cinema, in...
Everywhere. Yeah, everywhere. But you see, what really shook these guys, they think that is a European... Basically, the idea on the insistence on form, it was in our Shastras also, by the way. It's not that we were minusing it, was eclipsed for a long time. I'll tell you about that later. But the 20th century, the Brits had made us forget that. And they wanted these Mayo School of Art, Calcutta, ye wo. They were training people to become artists who would then be employed in making charts, etc., for railways and etc., you know. Adept at being draftsmen, basically. But things changed.
And you began painting regularly?
I was painting all the time. I mean, even during the partition, when I came to Simla, there was nothing else for me to do. I was wandering up and down, doing landscapes, ye, wo, vagara, vagara. And I was, even in Lahore, of course, I was very... in school in England, I had studied art, and as a part of my school certificate exam. I mean, I got a credit in that. And I was drawing, painting, all that kind of thing was much. It didn't happen suddenly, So I was continuing this all the time, and it gathered momentum with these guys. It became very speedy, in fact. And the funny thing is that, you see, the bank, now the conflict begins rather early. I was pretty good at my job. They all thought I was good at it. And the bank people thought I was good at it. I was a good chap also, you see. But they wanted me to be, it's a total life, being a banker. You socially, you have to meet the right people. You got to belong to the right club. All that, wear proper clothes. All that goes with banking, including your sport. Sailing was the thing in Bombay. And it happens, it's never done, it's never told you better do this. Nobody tells you. There's no dictation. You are a member of a society, and you have to ally yourself with the moods and the features of that particular society, the way they function. You got to be able to dance, for instance, on a dance floor, all that. And here was, the manager comes to me one day and he says, very friendly, very stern in their jobs, but very friendly also. He comes and he tells me, he says, come, I'm going out for a sale, would you like to come? So I said, yes, sir. All right, this is in the evening, he's going home. I was the accountant at that stage, a pile of work on my table. I said, yes. So I came, I went with him. He was an excellent seaman, and he sailed this boat. I enjoyed it, sitting there and so on. I came back, and a day or two after, he said, would you like to sort of buy a share in Keith Atkinson, the other chap in the bank, great friend of mine. He had a share in something. He was sailing also. He said, would you like to buy a share in the boat? And after all, sailing is a very good thing for you to know. So I said, I'll think about it, sir. So later on, I told him, I said, I paint in my time. I don't think I'm going to have the time for it. This went into my report. That his interests, he says they don't collide with what he's doing, but he's not extending himself in the direction that we would like him to, socially, you see. Later on, actually, when I showed there in London, they all came. Then I was a great boy, because art, it was beyond them. You see, in fact, the board, they bought a painting of mine from a show.
Really?
At Leicester Gallery. It was hanging in the boardroom. I don't know where it is now, but it was hanging there.
When was your first Bombay show? In Seoul?
My first Bombay, I was showing with the group. I, in fact, wrote catalogs for the group, which I've got. This would have been, let me tell you, one thing very important here was that it wasn't a European exercise being put into us. Although Leiden and so on were there, the expats, and certainly they had the literature, they had the know-all, and they were very influential people like Langhammer and so on. And they aligned themselves with the group aligned themselves with these people too, and they got a lot of knowledge from them. And so, but the group was accused of being, second-hand, kind of taking everything from Europe and becoming Europeanized and so on. That they didn't want, and certainly the Maharashtrian never wanted it. But the fact is, this was not so, because we were a pretty free-thinking people. I mean, what you saw was the best things happening in the world. You can't suddenly turn your eye away from it, you know. You have to take that into account. You can't say, just because I'm an Indian, I can't look at that. I mean, this is ridiculous, no? But they all were also very aware of their inheritance here. They went, at that time there was a huge exhibition in Rashtrapati Bhavan. Husain, Souza, these two for sure, I don't know who else. But these two guys came up and they saw these things and they were knocked out. Husain did a whole lot of drawings on Khajuraho. Wonderful drawings. Linear, straight, with great confidence, you know, marvelous drawings with a pen. No erasures, no nothing. You can't erase that, you know. Same thing with Souza. Souza painted some wonderful nudes after that. And the funny thing is, see, they were nudes all right. They were also sexy. Like Indian sculpture is for people to say this is just beautiful form, you know, this is all baloney. It is sexy. It is inviting, and it is there. It is a fact of life, you know. It is that honest. And they were absolutely imbued with this kind of honesty.
So you were showing with the group.
I showed with the group. But Raza, you see, Raza, Padamsee and Souza went to Paris. They had a show there, which was a knockout, which went off extremely well. You know. So they were not, you see, they were not going there just like babies trying to learn things. Huh? They went, and I mean, Paris at that stage was blooming with talent and people and ideas, and it was a total atmosphere that you plunged into, and it was impossible not to be affected by it. Of course, you are affected.
And that must have kind of diluted the group a bit.
It did not, nor did they. The funny thing is, this is what proves the validity of the group. Friendships occurred also during. I mean, we all became very great friends, helping each other. No, I can't see this helping now. But I remember, for instance, when Raza was in Paris, I was on my way to London, I was showing in London, and I was staying with Raza. He gave me a list of people to invite. He said, do get your gallery, do invite these people. They bought my work, they will also buy your work. आजकल के ज़माने में कौन कहता है ऐसे? I mean, they keep their lists packed away. They won't drive up. All sorts of. It's a very a cloak and dagger society now, and it was absolutely open and helping like hell. Everybody helped everybody. They did, you know.
Somewhere along the way, with this kind of going to London and showing with friends and meeting and having these exciting conversations, somewhere along the way you would be thinking of leaving banking.
I was, but I mean...
You were there for 14 years.
I was there for 14 years. Of course I was thinking of leaving the banking along and so on. But, you know, I was married. I wasn't selling as much as... I couldn't have been economically independent and so on. But, you know, you get over this feeling, this jijik, you know, okay, will I make it, will I not make it? You get over that. I mean, if you are that fond of painting, then you get over it. And that's the proof when you should, you know.
And that turning point came.
That turning point came. The group was wanting me to leave. Can you imagine? You know. Although Husain later on said, "Kya yaar, तुमने छोड़ दिया? You were one of our buyers, you know." It's a very sad day for us. He was one of the guys who came to the bank when the last day, standing at the portals of that great building, you know, the bank, NBI, And clerks were giving me a farewell tea party, you know, saying, "You'll be very great, sir, ye wo." So these fellows were saying, Bal Chabra and Husain and Gaitonde, three guys, and then, oh, bar nickel, you know, this kind of thing going on. And when I came out, it's very funny, I got into the bank because of the tie. When I came out, the first thing they did was to take my tie off. He said, "You won't need this anymore." And the same night, Raza was in Paris. Raza had a dinner party for me in Paris the day I left. It was celebration. Chutti ki is. Does this bonhomie exist today? I'm asking you. And there was, I mean, you know, we were not, it's not a sentimental attachment, it was great friendship. Or I mean, I've got this girl doing my archives, we wrote letters to each other, files of letters, you see there.
And you've kept everything.
I've kept everything, Akbar kept everything, Raza kept everything.
This is...
that book has been published, with Raza, letters between Raza and me, for instance, then between Bal Chabra and Raza. Then there's the huge correspondence with me and Husain, which began in Urdu.
Is it published?
You know something, it was given when the book was written by on me. In the first book, which Gayatri wrote, I'm a simple Charlie there. I gave all the files away, all these letters, and I said, you use what you want. All the files were returned after it was done, excepting Husain's file, which is a fat file full of letters, you know. His letters to me.
That's tragic.
It just disappeared.
So what is she saying?
She said she does not. We went to the press, we saw the press, it was looted there. Somebody took it away. I still have some letters of
But the archives is going on.
Yes, I'm having all these things. She's the proper archivist. She's working for the Raza Foundation also. She did the book.
And this will be a book, possibly.
Ultimately, she said there can be many books in this.
And then comes any major milestone after you quit? Something that you remember that really validated your decision?
Well, I'm going to historically, then, for instance, I was in, what happened was, then I was in the bank, I was in Madras, and one fine day, this man called Chadbourne Gilpatrick. Chadbourne Gilpatrick had a brother who was in the State Department also. Now, this fellow was also a high flyer amongst them, and I think he was working for Rockefeller. And he came to me and he said, how would you feel? How would you feel if you were told, if money was made available for you to go around the world, see this, see whatever you want to see, and come back, go to New York and see what's happening there and so on. It's a fabulous situation. The museums are wonderful. And you spend a year doing that. How that's... So I said, yeah, but I'm in a bank right now. Oh, you can leave that. So I said, okay, I'll let you know. So I wrote to him and I thought, I don't want to leave the bank just because I want a trip around the world. I mean, that's a pretty cheap thing, The bank, by the way, stood by me very solidly all the way. They wanted me to stay. I got letters and so on from them.
Was this Rockefeller offer part of the American effort?
I was the first on it.
And you did go?
Hang on. I was the first on it, primarily because I can speak. I think that they were impressed, they came, saw me, they talked, living well and so on. They thought, good chap to have around, his knowledge. He's been to school in England, he knows European art and all the rest of it. And then then after I said, when I resigned, I said, then I wrote to them, said, I'm now a free man if you consider me still worthwhile having. So they said yes. Then I wrote back to them. I said, please let me know what my obligations are. पैसे तो दे रहे हो, What are your expectations from me? And they said, none, nothing. I've got the correspondence. We don't expect anything from you. But we wanted to see and so on and so forth. And we're making suggestions that you go, you know, I'd been to Britain so many times in my own shows there and whatever, I was schooling there. So to see the other part of the world, I'd been the East I'd never seen, you know. So I went to Burma, I went to Indonesia, I went to Japan and spent 3 months, over 3 months, going to these different places.
Funded by the Rockefeller. But funded by the Rockefeller Pen.
I had the money. It was $650 plus tickets and everything else, you know. And the library, there was for buying books and things on the way. It was a pretty good deal. And I mean, it was comfortable. But Indonesia was in the midst of shambles, you know, at that stage. It was in a terrible monetary condition, you know. I had to sell my watch and all that sort of thing. But all of that, then I went to these different places, met friends, met Zainul Abidin in Bangladesh, wonderful man, and I went there again afterwards. And then Japan, I met some wonderful friends and wonderful people, you know. It was a very worthwhile trip to see. The other half of the world is living like that, and there are painters there. Wamiya, you know, we are not the kingpins or anything like that. Thailand was a very wonderful experience being in Thailand, you know. And then in America became an extremely important thing. See, apart from now, my reading is that why did Rockefeller give me this fellowship? And then they tackled my mind. Who are the other painters? Kya ho raha hai ye wo? And they were making trips. They made friends with the people I'd suggested. There was Ram Kumar there. There was Husain there, and Bal Chabra. Raza was in Paris already, but he came over. They made him come over from Paris and so on. We were staying at the Chelsea Hotel. Gaitonde. The funny thing, Porter McRae says to me, you know, he says, recommended Gaitonde, you know, yeah, he's very quiet. B, I don't think he's interested in painting. He's seeing movies the whole day, all the time, you know, all that kind of thing. I said, he's a quiet fellow, let him be. And if he sees movie, of course, he's interested in movies, you know. But he's a very fine painter. And look what happened now. He's the first guy who was showing in the Guggenheim after Porter died and poor chap and everything, all that, you know.
What were the themes of your work around that time?
Well, listen, now this is another story. Then when I was in Japan, I visited various people. I saw a lot of museums and so on, and saw the Japanese culture at its best. That is, when it produced ink paintings, sumi paintings on paper. Now, there, you see, the Japanese and the Chinese had a certain relationship over this thing. The Chinese was way up, and Japan tried to emulate, but then point is that Japan also produced great masters in the whole business. And it was very easy for me to then fall into that. But then I'm not Chinese, I'm not Japanese, I'm not living there forever. I'm never likely to be living in that situation, you know. But I learnt, I saw I got all the brushes, the inks and everything else, and paper and whatnot. Well, it so happened that on this journey back from Japan, came via Honolulu. Honolulu, we had a little room in a hotel. And you spend a couple of days in Honolulu, and it's about the best. That's it. I mean, you can't do much more than that, 2, 3 days. And so. Then I came back one day, Renu was tired, she went to bed, and the room was it had a double bed, that's it. And there was a chair somewhere, you could weave your way around to the bathroom, and there's a bathroom we had. So I wanted to work, and I said, well, I've got all these inks and stuff with me, let me try it. So the only place to do that, make messes, was the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom and I laid on the ink on the bathtub and put this paper on it and threw water on it and Jesus knows what, made a design. And then finally when I picked it up, it was horrible. The sheet of paper was dreadful, I tore it out. But what remained on the bottom of the bathtub was marvelous. So there was this business, the whole business of addition and extraction. It's a theory that comes out. And I persevered with that. That is, I was putting in paper, I was inking on a tub, inking it, putting a larger sheet of paper from the top, bigger than the tub, so that when it goes down, there are rivulets which are made by the sinking of the paper all around. So I managed then to control that by these rivulets, these air gaps which went down to the bottom, putting ink through that and following it up with water. And and it was fantastic.
Was Christ beginning to appear in your work at that time?
I had done pictures of Christ, yes.
It's a very amazing theme for a
Hindu.
Not really, I don't mean that, but I'm just saying for you to veer towards the crucifixion and...
Well, you see, I wasn't trying to illustrate the Bible. Although in school, when I'd been in cathedral school, Lahore and so on, all the Christians were made to sit in the same class. They were there. The non-Christians who didn't want to be a part of the Bible class came and sat down near the teacher was on the wooden platform. So I used to sit there. But all of us, 2 or 3 or 4 of us, including Teji Chawla, we used to listen into what was being said. How can you not? Huh? So I got interested in.
So the stories have informed your work?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember as a kid I must have been 7 or something, 5, 6 or something like that. And my father had just come back from Europe after doing his PhD, and then he had brought a little copy of the Last Supper. And then he had been to Form Christian College in Lahore. So they wanted him to convert him, and he said, no, I don't want to get converted. I can be very interested, but why the hell do you want to convert me? So he didn't get converted, but he was very, very au courant with the Bible. So when I was doing this picture, I couldn't, and he showed me this picture, which I tried to copy. I remember this very distinctly, and I was disgusted with myself because I couldn't really do things. I mean, I'm not Da Vinci. And I took it to my father, and he was very good. He only had his left hand, he lost his right as a child. But he said, and he did really a postcard-sized drawing of the Last Supper in pencil, indicating the structure, people as people, mixing, so on, so on, so on. That's how it should be. That's how you should begin with this. So I was very,
But what is it about the whole idea about the Christian themes?
It's a universal thing. If you look at it.
Of what? Compassion?
No, yes, it is very human, and it doesn't depend on being a Christian. You don't have to have those feelings only for Christians, They're not sort of compartmentalized and only saved for Christians. They're meant for the whole bloody world if they look at it with an open mind.
And those works, while painting them, you've tried to bring out the humanity of the whole thing.
Of course, the whole thing actually links up with what you're living. I mean, for instance, at the moment I'm thinking, that with all this note bandi and all the rest of which was going on, there's a famous instance where Christ is shown a coin and said, who does this belong to? There's Caesar on one side and they're trying to trap him, you see. He was talking about the kingdom of God. And he said, where is the bloody kingdom of God? It's the kingdom of Caesar, Then his answer is very political and very right, sharply. He says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. And this happens continuously. You can read this situation, the duplicate of it, which is, and its applications, for instance. I did a picture, actually, now that you're talking about the Last Supper. I did a picture called The Last Bite, which you should see in Bombay, which is with Wazirani. This is exactly, the spread is exactly like, but all of these guys are painters that I knew. Husain in the middle is Christ.
It's with
He
him.
won't sell it even.
No, but I'd like to get an image at least, so I can use. Yeah, I will.
It is there. And they're all painted. There's Raza there, there's Swaminathan there, there's Jairam Patel there, there's Gaitonde there, Bal Chabda is there, Souza is there, Tayyib Mehta is there. So it's I thought I'd put all these crooks together.
No, so again, now we have moved on to your themes. Even the other series, your fascinations and all that, people, get stuck and say that, you've got the bandmasters and all. But I would like to go beyond and say that you've got not just bandmasters, but people going about their daily life.
This is what it is. The bandmasters are these band guys. Where do they emanate from? The bloody partition had a lot to do with this thing. Everybody was, I managed to get my sort of exit from that desperate situation in this way I told you about. Other people were less fortunate in a sense, they were tumbled out. And Delhi was full of this. And in fact, the encroachment it was considered an encroachment of the Punjabis coming here, not begging. There were no beggars. And they were all trying to do something that they could, including making the chana bhaturas, which they were doing at home. They brought it onto the street, into the great Connaught place, which was meant for the sabluks to walk on and so on. Chabdis were brought there. And these people, the Delhi was thought that this is an encroachment on their culture. What is this chana bhatura sit in the middle of Connaught place? But they did. I did a whole lot on pavement dwellers, and life on the street. And I did a lot for the trucks. I did a whole bevy of trucks. At one time I spent years doing it, People living in trucks. They become, the truck is their home. And they assume the color of whatever they're carrying every day. Whether it's cement, then they all look like cement men, or mud, or coal, or whatever, And at night they just sleep wherever they can. I've got one picture of that still.
The main quality and what I take away from all your work is constant empathy.
Yes.
With your...
Yes. Geeta Kapoor, who's a sort of theoretician in all of this, I think she said something about that. I don't make alignments with the parties, because I don't think that politics has anything to do with my... Politics has and has not, in this sense, But the point is, if I become political, I'll have to say goodbye to painting. To be a successful politician, you've got to be in it 100%. Just as I think to be a successful painter, you've got to be in it 100%.
There's one question that I cannot leave unasked.
Yeah.
What do you think of where Indian art is today?
Well, For one thing, it's uneven. It always was uneven. So that is nothing new. But what I gather is from this girl who was down in Cochin and with this new setup that they made. I asked her, she was organizing a part of that thing. She's from that part of the world. A very bright person. She's doing a PhD in JNU and so on. And she's doing my documentation. I said, no, what is it that they want? I mean, what is so special? So they say that none of us and the work of us is ever going to stay. So I said, they're pitching themselves into some kind of a voyeuristic kind of a situation. They're viewing things in a snowball or into a crystal ball and saying, these will disappear, this will... It's hardly... sitting in judgment in that kind of sense is ridiculous for anybody at any time, I think.
So you mean they think this...
They think we'll disappear. They think our work we will certainly disappear, I think W.H. Auden had a wonderful line in that elegy to W.B. Yeats. He says, poetry makes nothing happen, but it has its own way of living, its own way of existence, for word of mouth. Chalega to chalega. You're not going to kill painting. And with the best will in the world, those guys will never be able to kill art.